The Temple Mount is the site of the first and second Jewish temples, but for hundreds of years it's been occupied by Muslim shrines. The Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Golden Dome of the Rock now sit on the site. But some Jewish people want to build a third Jewish temple.
Prophecies are colliding with modern-day politics. A third temple is no longer just a prophecy. It's a plan in motion. And with it, something deeply unsettling has emerged from beneath the surface. Could we be witnessing the final pieces of a biblical timeline falling into place? What if ancient rituals, long forbidden, are about to return? What does this mean for Israel and the world? In this video, we'll reveal what's really happening on the Temple Mount, the rise of powerful religious figures, and why even world leaders are preparing for what's next. Stay until the end. What we uncovered is chilling. Signs of the end are converging. In recent years, many have begun to view the world through a prophetic lens, seeing global events as aligning with ancient texts. Among the most striking developments is the drying up of the Euphrates River. Once a mighty source of life flowing through modern-day Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, parts of the Euphrates have diminished dramatically due to a combination of climate change and regional water management. Some consider this environmental shift a direct sign of end-time prophecies found in the Book of Revelation, where the drying precedes the release of powerful spiritual forces. Alongside this, the restoration of the Siloam Pool in Jerusalem, a site deeply connected to biblical healing miracles, is viewed as another signal, interpreted by many as the earth preparing itself for monumental spiritual change. Another sign catching worldwide attention is the increasing talk of war and conflict. From regional skirmishes to global tensions, talk of wars and rumors of wars seems to echo Jesus' own warnings in the Gospel accounts. While war has sadly never been absent from the human timeline, the current intensity and frequency of conflicts, especially in and around the Middle East, are seen by some religious groups as more than a coincidence. These developments aren't just geopolitical. Many believe they are spiritual markers, ticking off boxes on a prophetic timeline. It's not uncommon for religious scholars and leaders to reference these events during sermons or online broadcasts, interpreting them as convergence points of multiple biblical prophecies. In the heart of this narrative evolution is the anticipated construction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. For Jews, the rebuilding of the temple is the awaited return into the Messianic age, a time of world peace and divine rule. The first and second temples served as the central places of worship and were destroyed in 586 BC and 70 CE, respectively. As far as Jewish tradition goes, the Third Temple will be built at the time of the Messiah and will have significant roles for both spiritual purification and the fulfillment of divine covenants. To many Christians, however, the construction of the temple serves a rather different symbolic purpose. It has a place of honor among those Christians who see it as a necessary step before the arrival of the Antichrist, who will desecrate the holy site and the return of Jesus Christ thereafter. The whole issue is beginning to impose a sort of heavy weight on certain sections of the Jewish community. Gershon Salomon, founder of the Temple Mount Faithful, and Rabbi Nachman Kahana have both voiced the opinion that the time for the Third Temple to be constructed is very near. Salomon has stated that the Temple Mount should be the focal point of Jewish life in the state of Israel. Rabbi Kahana, for his part, expects the temple to be built before he dies. These voices are not isolated. They reflect the heightened energy among various groups currently preparing vessels, garments, and rituals for temple service. There are suggestions that almost all these components are actually ready and just awaiting a political or divine green light. Conducting some movement on the ground would only be met with great temptation from the insiders, as the Temple Mount is a kind of sore in the eye. In the heart of that locale stands the Dome of the Rock, a landmark in Islamic worship. The idea that the Third Temple needs to be put in that exact location engenders the coexistence of spiritual and political tension. Rumors within religious and political circles suggest that something must first be taken out or destroyed so that new construction can begin. Thus, people wonder whether such removal would spark a major religious conflict. The very idea has spurred protests, discussions, and military alertness. With these signs and all of this speculation being aligned, more and more believers worldwide, Jews and Christians, are beginning to watch the times with some expectation. Signs have been sprouting on the internet, from religious forums and mainstream media, about the increasing prophetic alignment between ancient prophecy and modern events. Many consider these as sensationalistic or coincidental phenomena, while others regard them as much more significant than that. There are many different interpretations attached to these developments, whether literal fulfillments or symbolic signals. Momentum is undeniable. Something is happening. Many are turning their eyes toward Jerusalem in expectation. But for the temple to be built, something must first be destroyed, and that's where tensions erupt. The red heifer sacrifice is ready. One of the most talked about developments in recent years among both Jewish and Christian prophetic circles is the preparation of the red heifer sacrifice. According to ancient Jewish law, the ashes of a flawless red heifer, an extremely rare cow with no blemishes, injuries, or even 2 hairs of a different color, are required to purify those who have come into contact with death. Without this ritual purification, temple services cannot begin. For decades, finding such a heifer has proven to be a near impossible task, as even a single white hair can render it disqualified. However, recent efforts have reignited hope. After years of anticipation and several disqualifications, one red heifer has now been deemed fit for sacrifice, stirring deep excitement in temple-focused communities. The current heifer under consideration is part of a larger effort led by the Temple Institute, which in 2018 imported 5 red calves from Texas to Israel. Over time, 3 were disqualified for developing blemishes or color inconsistencies. In 2024, 2 remained under close observation, and just recently, one of them was selected as the ideal candidate.
This is the ritual law that God has commanded, instruct the children of Israel to bring you a red cow without blemish.
Jewish priests, known as Kohanim, are now reportedly preparing to perform the red heifer ceremony for the first time in over 2,000 years. Rumors have spread that everything, from the altar to the ritual garments and vessels, is now ready, awaiting only governmental approval and the precise timing considered ritually appropriate. More than symbolic, this ceremony carries great spiritual meaning. For those tracking prophetic timelines, the red heifer sacrifice is considered a huge event. Some rabbis believe this act will truly mark the beginning of the Third Temple era. According to them, no priest can enter the sacred temple precinct without purification. Therefore, the red heifer is no ordinary cow. It is the key that opens the door to prophetic fulfillment. The red heifer also draws keen interest from Christians, especially in evangelical circles, who associate it with end-time prophecy and the rebuilding of the temple as a precursor to events like the Antichrist's rise and the Second Coming. Rabbi Azariah Ariel, an eminent figure in the Red Heifer Project, recently spoke to quell confusion created by the media. It had been reported that all the heifers had been disqualified, an assertion that Rabbi Ariel denied. He explained that the designation of red heifer could be lost. A white hair may grow upon it, qualifying its disqualification. However, it may fall out of its own, making it ritually acceptable. Because of these variables, the entire selection process is kept extremely cautious and spiritually important. Given all of this, the stakes are very high, and the Temple Institute has been careful to ensure that every halachic consideration has been met before proceeding. There would be a multitude of people here, as well as pilgrims, viewers, and media from around the globe, painting a vivid portrait of the ritual. Such grand pomp and solemnity assigned to the ceremony make historic an event that many consider as a once-in-a-generation event. Already, preparatory arrangements are underway for the beaming of the ceremony across the world. The rumor reports also tell that this will be the moment when the long-awaited first cornerstone of the Third Temple will be laid as an official spiritual trigger. Among temple groups, there is a growing conviction that once the purification rite is complete, there will be no more theological or ritual barriers to beginning construction. With this event being linked to wider prophetic movements, many refer to what certain rabbis say about this sacrifice being a spiritual activation. This they describe as the ignition of the prophetic engine. Detractors are calling this purely an act of religious theatrics, whereas, in the eyes of believers, it becomes an act of divine synchronization. They see the convergence of many prophetic markers: the red heifer, the preparations for temple tools, and even the restoration of ancient sites like the Pool of Siloam, which serve as evidence that prophesied history is being set in motion. For the interested observer, the red heifer sacrifice is not only the purification of a heifer, but also the manifestation of prophecy before their eyes. And speaking of cornerstones, wait until you hear what a former politician just carved by hand. The cornerstone has been chiseled. A powerful and symbolic event recently stirred the attention of religious watchers and prophecy enthusiasts around the world: the carving of a cornerstone intended for the Third Temple. In a quiet but striking moment captured on video, former Israeli Knesset member Moshe Feiglin was seen near the town of Eli, holding a chisel and hammer as he prayed over a stone. With steady hands, he etched into the rock, offering a heartfelt invocation that the people of Israel would be shaped like the stone, fit for building the house of God. Though he called the act symbolic, many see it as more than just a gesture. It marked, to them, the transition from vision to tangible preparation. Feiglin, known for his outspoken support of restoring Jewish sovereignty over the Temple Mount, has long championed religious revivalism in Israel. In several public appearances, he has stated that if he were to become prime minister, he would waste no time in rebuilding the Third Temple. For some, his actions and words are expressions of national pride and spiritual destiny. For others, they're viewed as dangerously provocative. Still, the video of him carving the cornerstone was widely shared, sparking excitement among those who believe that the prophetic wheels are now in motion. Rumors suggest that the cornerstone Feiglin worked on is intended to be used in the foundational ceremony once the temple's construction is authorized. Aside from Feiglin's involvement, several organizations have continued to make steady progress toward the rebuilding of the temple. The Temple Mount Faithful and the Temple Institute were once considered fringe groups, but their influence is steadily growing in religious and political circles. Over the years, they have created replicas of temple vessels, trained priests to serve, and prepared architectural plans for the Third Temple. The Temple Institute even created virtual tours of a fully reconstructed temple that gave a robust teaser of what they think is just around the corner. Supporters view these as steps of faith and evidence that the people of Israel are ready to restore what was lost. Grassroots movements are really spiritual in nature, but they have never been without political impetus. Religious figures, local politicians, and international personalities support their cause. Some rumors say certain evangelical Christian American donors surreptitiously financed temple tools and priestly garments. The emerging alliance of Jewish and Christian prophecy-minded groups has, in addition, begun to forge a global drive that is actually beginning to take on a physical form. From menorahs to altars, the vessels of ancient worship are being rebuilt not merely as museum pieces, but living implements for use. These grassroots movements, although intensely spiritual, are neither independent of the political momentum. Their patrons are some religious leaders, local politicians, and international figures. The rumor is that some donors from evangelical Christian circles in the United States have somehow covertly contributed to the creation of temple tools and priestly garments. This emerging alliance between the prophecy-oriented Jewish groups and their Christian counterparts has led to the formulation of a global thrust that is gradually taking on physical manifestations, menorahs to altars. These ancient vessels of worship are being rebuilt, not as museum pieces, but for real use. Nonetheless, there's an ever-increasing movement behind this stone, yet it has remained unturned, unmovable, literally and politically. That's due to the Dome of the Rock. The dome, golden and brimming with the pride of Islam, stands right where the first and second temples once stood, and is today considered to be perhaps one of the holiest sites for Muslims. The setting of this shrine practically makes the construction of a third temple an international question. Laying a cornerstone on the Temple Mount without Islamic cooperation would certainly lead to reactions, not only from the Palestinian authorities, but also from the Muslim world in general. Everything makes it a bold, although unofficial, act for Feiglin, very much laden with theological and political risk. But what stands in the way is more than politics. It's one of Islam's most sacred places. The Dome of the Rock standoff. At the very heart of one of the world's most contested religious and political issues lies the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, a site sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet, this small plateau has become a battleground of prophetic expectation and geopolitical tension. For many Jews, the Temple Mount is the holiest site on earth, the location of the first and second temples. To rebuild the third temple, tradition holds that it must be erected on the same spot. However, there's a major obstacle. The Dome of the Rock, a revered Islamic shrine, currently occupies that sacred ground. This has led to a tense spiritual standoff, with some seeing it as the ultimate showdown between prophetic destiny and religious sovereignty. The Dome of the Rock, with its iconic golden dome, is not merely a historical monument. For Muslims, it is believed to mark the site from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the night journey. Alongside it is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, considered the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. This entire compound is referred to as Haram al-Sharif in Arabic, and any attempt to alter, relocate, or remove any of its structures is seen as an existential threat by the Muslim world. As such, discussions around rebuilding the Jewish temple are met with fierce resistance and deep suspicion across Islamic communities. October 2023 is the end of the line for. There are rumors circulating that the Israeli officials, along with temple activists, are quite aware that the construction of the third temple requires the removal of the Dome of the Rock. Yet various religious commentators insist, along with informal groups like the Temple Mount Faithful, that this is about as unavoidable as it gets. This group claims that the very essence of prophecy demands that the original sacred site be cleared away. All these claims indefinitely increase tensions, most especially during Jewish and Islamic holy days when the Temple Mount inevitably becomes a hotbed for demonstrations and police crackdowns, and they wonder whether it is possible to live together. Could it be that both the Dome of the Rock and a rebuilt Jewish temple can occupy the same space? The idea of such an interfaith or even academic structure has been proposed and even debated around the house semantically, but remains almost totally imaginary. In actual practice, there is no framework, certainly not political or spiritual, that would underwrite that solution. The Israeli government has made it clear a number of times that the present status quo of the Temple Mount should remain intact, at least publicly. But rumor has it that some policymakers tend to believe, behind closed doors, that the dream of a third temple can never become true without the Dome of the Rock being removed. This belief, although officially unendorsed, instills hope and anxiety as well among religious communities. It's not merely hypothetical. The Temple Mount is a real battleground. Several times, the Israeli police and Palestinian protesters have clashed over fears that Jewish groups are going to attempt to alter the site's status. Some archaeological digs and Jewish activists' visits to the site have led to international condemnation, as well as widespread protests across the Arab world. Clearly, it is a global flashpoint. This is not just a local issue. Add to that fact 3 major world religions claiming the land, and any change to its current structure can unleash widespread riots or maybe even a world war. The conversation here turns to scriptural prophecy. For many watchers of biblical and Quranic end-time narratives, the standoff at the Temple Mount is not merely about an architectural structure. It is about destiny. They say the third temple cannot arise until the dome has first fallen, giving rise to some chilling speculations. Would this cause a world war? Would uprooting the dome of the rock be the spark in the powder keg for a religious conflict and actualize the grinding predictions of all prophetic scriptures? Such questions have lingered on the minds of many and have created a climate of fervor mixed with dread. In a region already full of volatility, the fate of this one sacred site could well decide the fate of the whole world, which begs the chilling question, will this trigger a global war? Political pressure behind the scenes. While the Third Temple discussion often focuses on religious prophecy and spiritual preparation, much of its momentum is quietly driven by political undercurrents. One of the key figures caught in this complex web is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Though he has never publicly endorsed the construction of the Third Temple, rumors abound that he privately supports it. Whispers in political circles suggest that Netanyahu has backed certain rabbis and religious leaders who are actively promoting temple-related agendas. While no official documents confirm this support, the speculation alone has stirred considerable debate, both within Israel and among global observers. Behind closed doors, Netanyahu reportedly finds himself at a crossroads. On one hand, endorsing temple-related movements risks sparking enormous backlash from the international community, particularly the Muslim world. On the other hand, he faces increasing pressure from his religious voter base, many of whom see the rebuilding of the temple as a divine imperative. In private meetings with ultra-Orthodox and nationalist leaders, Netanyahu has been shown polling data indicating a substantial portion of his core supporters are not only in favor of Jewish sovereignty over the Temple Mount, but are eagerly waiting for action to be taken. This leaves him in a delicate position, one where silence may be interpreted as quiet consent. As per inside sources, there are signs that Netanyahu has started seeing the temple narrative as not merely a religiously inspired ideal, but also as a potential vehicle for uniting a deeply internalized, divided nation. This visual image of a third temple has emerged as a stark contrasting symbol to these divisions and tensions within Israeli society, whether they be the internal tensions over judicial reforms or the long-simmering tensions between the religious and secular communities. Allegations regarding some conversations within his cabinet indicate formal strategies that identify national religious identity as a potential rallying cry. Some argue that government-sanctioned prayers in areas on or beside the Temple Mount may very well operate as a starting point to incrementally change the mindset of the public and gain acceptance for more dramatic changes in the future. Adding to the pressure on the Temple Mount are growing political activists who focus on the temple. Some of them now have greater influence in the Knesset. A few Knesset members have openly called for increased Jewish access to the Temple Mount and support organizations that train priests, build temple tools, and prepare for ritual sacrifices. These voices are not isolated. They are part of a growing political and religious bloc that could eventually influence national policy. In this context, Netanyahu's calculated silence has been interpreted by some as quiet encouragement, while others criticize him for playing with fire. Nevertheless, the Prime Minister still finds himself trying to walk a fine line amid expectations on the domestic and international fronts. And now, with Donald Trump back in power, what happens next may no longer be a mystery. Trump, Evangelicals, and prophetic push. In the intricate web of global politics and biblical prophecy, few modern figures have stirred more speculation than Donald Trump. For many evangelical Christians, especially within the United States, Trump is not just a political leader. He's seen as a Cyrus-like figure, referencing the Persian king who allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple after exile. This comparison has gained widespread traction in recent years, particularly after Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in 2018. That move was seen by many Christian Zionists as a prophetic trigger, one that aligned modern geopolitics with ancient scripture. The sense that Trump may be divinely chosen to play a role in the rebuilding of the Third Temple has only intensified with his return to power. Evangelical support for Israel and the Temple Mount agenda is not new, but it has reached new levels of visibility and influence. Christian Zionist groups have funneled millions of dollars into projects supporting Jewish settlement in the biblical heartland, and more recently, into organizations preparing for the construction of the Third Temple. Groups like Heyovel and various U.S.-based ministries have hosted temple-focused conferences, sponsored prayer campaigns, and even collaborated with Israeli activists on temple readiness. Rumors suggest that some of these groups are now helping to fund the Temple Institute and other organizations actively involved in preparing the sacred tools and training priests for future worship. The expanding alliance between the Christian and Jewish groups is more than financial. It is also spiritual. Differences in theology notwithstanding, Evangelicals and Orthodox Jews find common ground in their expectation of the Third Temple. Christians believe the temple would herald the return of Jesus and the Jews as the coming of the long-awaited Messiah. Such expectations account for such moments of tremendous unity, like joint prayer gatherings, prophecy tours in Jerusalem, and collective public statements. In the minds of many believers, it is not an accident, but prophetic cooperation on the part of the merged faiths. Trump's rapport with the Israeli high officials and religious activists increased that momentum. During his presidency, he met several high-profile Israeli rabbis and evangelical leaders, all of whom openly spoke about the Third Temple. Some even presented him with gifts, such as coins with his engraved image alongside King Cyrus. These gestures were seen as more than ceremonial declarations. They were viewed as proclaiming that the prophetic age had begun. Indeed, there are rumors that once again conversations about support of temple-related initiatives have resumed at high levels, though mostly behind closed doors. Although traditional media ridicule these occurrences as fringe ideologies, their impact is undeniable. Actual decisions are derived from prophetic expectation, while such religious zeal derails the most fundamental legislative priorities and international alliances. The coming into power of a U.S. president who will be enthusiastically embraced not only by Israeli nationalists, but also American evangelicals, will present a one-time opportunity for the temple agenda. The unreasoned political boldness and disregard for diplomatic tradition have convinced believers that Trump could be the politician who breaks the long-time status quo regarding the Temple Mount. But with new excavations underway, the past may hold secrets too dangerous to ignore. The terrifying mystery. In 2023, a ripple of excitement and controversy swept through prophetic and archaeological communities when members of the Temple Mount faithful announced a stunning claim. They had uncovered relics believed to be from the Second Temple. According to the group, the findings included ancient coins, pottery shards, and even a stone bearing an inscription that referenced the holy site. These discoveries were said to have been unearthed during a quiet excavation attempt at the base of the Temple Mount. Though the excavation was not officially sanctioned, it quickly drew global attention, with supporters calling it a breakthrough in confirming the historical foundation for rebuilding the Third Temple. However, the excitement was short-lived. As news of the dig spread, violent protests erupted from Palestinian groups and religious leaders who viewed the excavation as an infringement on Islamic sovereignty over the Temple Mount. In response to the mounting tensions, the Israeli government stepped in and swiftly halted the excavation. The artifacts were seized and transferred to the Israeli Antiquities Authority, where their authenticity remains under scrutiny. Rumors suggest a divide even within the authority, with some experts convinced the artifacts are genuine remnants of the temple era, while others remain deeply skeptical, calling for further analysis. Large implications spring from such a discovery, politically and religiously. If these artifacts are genuine and trace back to the Second Temple, they could be seen as physical evidence supporting the Jewish claim to the Temple Mount. They could nurture calls to rebuild the Third Temple and reopen the status of the sacred site internationally for debate. Some activists argue that these artifacts should be exhibited. Such an exhibition, they argue, could educate the world while reaffirming the Jewish historical connection to the site. Others warn that displaying the artifacts could inflame tensions that are already at the boiling point and could provoke a worldwide reaction. Either way, the relics, in whatever state or condition, are burdened with prophetic significance far beyond their material worth. It sparked a wave of spiritual interpretation in the prophecy-watching community, with many interpreting the discovery as a signal from God, as part of His master timeline unfolding with regard to the end of days. Among the Christian and Jewish eschatology perspectives, the Antichrist is expected to enter the Third Temple after its reconstruction and desecrate it, turning it into a house of deception and disorder across the globe. Most of these prophecies are drawn from scriptural readings, such as those in Daniel and Revelation, and are advanced as they link up with current events, such as climbs in global conflict, environmental disasters, and political instability. For some of them, the discovery of relics of the temple met no signs of restoration but impending confrontation. There are now whispers that more than mere artifacts were discovered. Some insiders even insist that the stones bore burned inscriptions of cryptic messages or prophetic sayings considered lost many ages ago. Now, there are murmurs of hidden rooms and underground tunnels. The original temple complex is somehow associated with these areas, perhaps up to now concealing some scrolls or sacred objects. However, none of the reports were publicly known, but such conjecture only increases the religious frenzy and a fresh wave of pilgrims heading to Jerusalem. Such rumors are not coincidences for true believers in divine timing, but rather part of a supernatural revelation that is only starting. So, what do you think? Are we truly witnessing the final signs before the Third Temple rises? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this unfolding prophecy. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss an upload. And while you're here, check out the video now showing on your screen. We think you'll find it just as eye-opening. See you there.